I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement with Justin Trudeau. We tore up the agreement with Justin Trudeau. I've ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau. Because I ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau, I know this now means that an election timing has become more uncertain.
Jagmeet Singh quickened the pulse of Canadian politics this week when he ripped up the supply and confidence agreement with the Liberal government. Singh's early departure plunges the Liberals, the Parliament, and the country into a fall of political uncertainty that almost certainly means an earlier than scheduled election. And that's where we start with our panel of party insiders. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer. Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. And Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. And she loved the ripped up.
Great.
Thank you all for living up to our studio and camera agreement and not tearing up our sack. Mel, let's start with you. Jagmeet Singh, I mean, he is the star of the week. He set the stage this week. He set the agenda this week. He dominated the news this week. Did he have a good week in your view?
If you were to look at my Twitter feed right now, maybe not. But if you did what,
Nobody has a good week on Twitter, by the way. So.
Every next week I wonder why I'm on this platform. But anyways, if you were looking at that, you might hear a lot of folks who had a lot of things to say. The same people who, when, Jagmeet entered a deal, said this is going to be the end of the NDP are now saying now that they're out of the deal, it's going to be the end of the NDP. So I don't take a lot of weight from those folks. But as I've talked about on this panel before, when things like this happen, I go home, I talk to people, and I talk to, my nonpartisan folks who aren't necessarily plugged in, who don't think the way that we do, who don't look at everything that we do. And for a lot of those folks, actually, the surprising reaction from this week, whether they were happy or they were just okay with it, was relief, which was an interesting one that I wasn't expecting. And the relief there was in regards to them seeing how the race for the next election is playing out and how far ahead the Conservatives are. And I think a lot of folks have been, and you know what, to be fair, me as well, have been waiting for the Liberals to do something to turn things around, have been waiting for months. What are they going to say? When are they going to decide why they're doing this? When are they going to take on the Conservatives in a real way? And that hasn't happened. So I think the relief of seeing that somebody is willing to do it, Jagmeet has said, I'm going to take this battle on. I'm going to fight for a vision that is hopeful instead of tearing it all down. And at least in my circle of nonpartisan folks who are, paying attention, but not as much as we are, it was relief to them. Somebody is going to take this guy on because that's not my vision of what Canada looks like.
Greg, now that the coalition has ended, I assume you're going to disagree with me. I mean, what's your view of it from your side of things?
I was surprised at how badly the NDP leader communicated this, especially when we found out that the video was done maybe a month ago. So this wasn't a last-minute issue. And he also knew that the Conservative leader had called him out on this. So he had to be prepared for that. And, not to suck up to my Friday boss here too much, but I saw a lot of Twitter traffic about your interview with him and about how he did not give you a straight answer. Corporate greed sounds like something that you would expect a hippie in the early 70s to be talking about. Nobody really knows what that means, and it was never in the supply and confidence agreement anyway. The same way with the press conference, really, really badly done. And he had so much time. He was in control of this. This was his moment to look decisive, and he did not. I do know the Liberals did consider at one point, would it be to their benefit to look decisive and to cancel the deal instead of the NDP. Right. But again, they're able to say that they made this Parliament work. And Minister Blair, in his earlier interview to you, mentioned the number of minority governments, since World War II. Well,
11, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I'll start with the millennium, and there's been 5. Out of the 8 elections, 5 of them have resulted in minority governments. And so perhaps we need to start looking at these deals as what we need to keep a Parliament sitting for longer than 2 years. Because I do think Canadians that aren't partisan want to see Parliament work and they want to see things done. The last thing I'll say on this, David, is I saw some New Democrat MPs say that they had gotten everything they wanted out of this. But what they really wanted out of this, and what most politicians want, is credit.
Yeah.
And they've never gotten the credit that I've never understood. And again, we keep treating Singh like he's a new politician. He's been around since 2011. He's not a newbie on this. And I think every time that they got a victory, he turned around and started criticizing the Prime Minister. And people would say, why are you in a deal with him then if you dislike this guy so strongly?
Well, now it's going to be, how can you vote in confidence for someone you said is weak and craven and all of these things? So I saw Mel taking notes as you were talking, so she has a lot of rebuttals. But we're going to bring in Fred. She has a lot to say. Fred, I'm sure you have a lot to say. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think Jagmeet Singh has shown how out of depth he is here. I thought his message, he had no catalyst for this. There was no, I'm ending this agreement for this real reason. It was just, time is up, basically. And we predicted this months ago on the show that this was going to happen. We knew it was going to happen because that was the right political play. But you need a message. You need a reason. He doesn't have a reason. He's announced, I'm divorcing the Liberals. I'm going to keep sleeping in the same bed with them, but I'm divorcing them. The marriage
family
is
show,
over.
Fred, but keep going.
That's what we're looking at here, where the pressure is now going to be on him to stand up now, because I can tell you, Poilievre and the team are going to bring confidence motions at every single opportunity.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to now defend that. And to Greg's point earlier about how he would go out and praise these different deals with the Liberals and then attack them in the same press conference. And it just does. He was such a poor communicator on that. I think he's really out of his depth here. I think he's, and at the same time, we talk about all these minority parliaments. This is now the new norm in Canada. He's lost a lot of credibility. He made a deal with the Liberals. They lived up to it for the most part. And now he's backed out a year early. So without a real reason for doing that. So I think, we could be headed, I think it's going to be a majority government the next time, blue-colored. But if it's not, I don't know who could actually work with Singh.
It's interesting, though, Mel, because he said the supply and confidence agreement was so successful in delivering from Canadians, we have no choice but to tear it up. It's an interesting rhetorical argument, but like you've got your notes. I want to hear your rebuttals to what the guys had to say.
Yeah. There's a few things I think we, because we pay close attention, we focus a lot on the mechanics and on how can you say this and how can you say this? But for folks who are tuning in and who are tuning in every now and then, you really have to paint the choice about why you're doing things and why you're not doing things. So I'll go back to you've gotten these good gains, but then you turn around and you criticize the Prime Minister. One of the biggest challenges that the NDP has, period, is to explain to people how they're different from the Liberals. So particularly in this deal, it's paramount for them to have been doing that.
Yep.
And you see this in focus groups all the time. You really have to make the choices super clear, and that does actually include a lot of, here's where we can work together, but also here's why we're very different. So that's actually very important for Jagmeet and the NDP to do.
The contrast thing.
Exactly, that contrast thing, to explain the differences and to explain the choices. So that's one thing. As for the actual deal, and I was around when that deal was brought in. The goal of it was never, once this is done, the Liberals done. My part of the deal is done. The agreement was always that this is a floor, this is not a ceiling, and every year they were supposed to renegotiate what else that they could add in there, what else that they could get for Canadians. And from what I understand, those conversations were going less and less well, because it didn't really seem like the Liberals got the moment and understood what people were really going through. And there was no willingness to put more stuff on the table. So at that point, you're actually not living up to your side of the deal. You're not renegotiating and adding more things in here that are going to help people. But
help me understand, because I interviewed Jagmeet Singh yesterday for about 20 minutes, and he was talking about price controls on food. Like, how do you do that when you're a free trade promoting government and deal with rents? And how do you do that when that's provincial jurisdiction, right? So how do you, and so those were, are you saying they tried to get those in Osaka and it just didn't happen? Or how can it mechanically even be done?
Well, I'll let the policy folks talk about the policy. As a communications person, I'll talk about the communications. But what I actually thought interesting is, and say what you will about his interview yesterday, but I actually thought it was interesting the proposals that he actually put forward when you asked him those questions. The fact that federal governments are giving loans to companies who are then turning around and making rent more expensive. Some of the things that they've done with the housing measures where I forget which component exactly, but if you were building quote unquote affordable housing, it actually had to be affordable. And when before the deal, it actually wasn't affordable. So they lowered what affordable actually meant. So those are kind of things that you actually can do at the federal government. But park that for a second if you want to talk about federal competence.
Jurisdiction.
Thank you. And provincial jurisdiction. People don't actually understand what that is, right?
But he should.
But he should. He should.
If he wants to be prime minister, he needs to know.
Let me finish. When people are going through a hard time, they want you to fix it. Period.
Yep.
If somebody's mother is dying in long-term care, they don't care whether it's federal. They don't care whether it's provincial. They
that's
want you to
insincere
sit
to
at
say you're gonna fix that.
They want you to sit at the table and they want you to fix it.
But don't you have to have the
It's
power to
not
fix
your-
it, to be to fix it?
The power to sit at the table.
But he walked away
Sit at
from
the table.
He walked away from the table. There's
But
something that
not the
I
Prime
don't
Minister.
like. There's a couple of ministers who have said that they're surprised. I think they're being too cute.
Yeah, I think that's
we knew. So
Everyone
they,
knew.
they had
Everyone
to know.
knew this was ending.
What I think they
Totally.
were surprised at, one was the way it was handled, which was not very elegant. An
Nobody
email.
would do it any other different way.
You know, like reporters knew, so that's not. But it was like they didn't try to get one more thing.
Yes.
And they just
But
walked
they
away.
did
and
all
so,
summer.
No, but you
that's-
got to
did
go
all
in. No, but they got to
summer,
go and
all
say, "This is what
spring."
we want. Will you give it to us?"
That'll give
That's
it.
what
he
you need
would
to do.
have,
They didn't
and
do
if he
that.
thought he was going to get that, the NDP leader would have said it in the media and put it in brokered and negotiated through the media. Instead, they decided that we need to run away from this. And why? And I think it's the two by-elections. This is, I
Not
don't think
the
it's going
by-elections.
well, and I think the by-elections aren't going well, and this is their Hail Mary pass to keep a seat and win a seat.
I don't know. I'm Fred. I don't know if you think it was the by-elections, but I mean, I think it's maybe that, but also next year. I mean, you can't run against Batman when you're Robin.
Totally.
Right.
Right? You got to
year
separate. The
away
dynamic
now.
duo's got to break up, and you got to be your own
We
thing
all
after a while.
knew the deal had to end. Like
June.
they had to break it.
But why not just say that? We need to end this because it's time for Canadians to make a choice. You know what I mean?
Well, I think we did.
I
hear
think
some
what
of
I think
that.
what they needed to do is say, "Hey, Liberals, this is what we want. We want this now." You talked about how they, that it was about this was a floor, not a ceiling. Like we can talk about other things.
Right.
They should have gone in and said what that was. Put that narrative out. This is what we want. Liberals said no. Deal's over.
But I
Instead of
think
just
he
instead
kept
of recording
saying,
a video
he
a month
said
ago.
75 times, I've ripped this up. That's the closest I'm ever going to be to ripped. He also said, let me be clear, and he wasn't. And then the other communication error on the NDP is after criticizing the Conservatives for using stock footage that was from Russia, they turn around and do the same thing. Russia, and I think CP has added that there might be some Israeli stuff there as well.
But
Sure,
let me,
but
let
I
me
mean, clip art is
compare-
clip art, right? Like,
yeah,
that's all
let me
I'm saying.
compare apples to apples. Putting two people sitting at a table from Getty Images compared to like a Russian jet are two very different things, right? Like, let's make sure that those.
Well, a Russian fighter jet is a Canadian jet at a time when Russian fighter jets are bombing Ukraine. But look, it's sloppy because the NDP also went out
Totally.
and castigated the Conservatives for
not-
being
it's not
sloppy.
great. It's
No,
not
no,
great.
it's not great. And
Wait,
the Liberals have
can I
done it in the
just-
past.
And apparently sat on this video for a month, right? It's not like they
Yeah,
just made it quickly.
I think they fixed the timing. I think it's more like end of August that the video was filmed. I think Jagmeet had to.
Okay, he told
say
me it
that
was like a month
afterwards?
ago, is what he said,
Yeah.
said to me yesterday. So, because
Okay.
yeah.
If I could just quickly.
Go ahead, go ahead.
And I've lost my train of thought, so never mind.
Okay, no, I was going to say, because it was interesting, because the timing of the video of when it was shot was an interesting argument as Mr. Singh defended himself and saying, oh, Pierre Poilievre said last week, I shot the video a month ago.
Right.
But then he talked about the rail impasse,
Yep.
which would have been after
Yeah.
the video was
Yeah.
shot and
The-
the
the
decision has
video-
been made as a factor
Right.
in the decision.
From what I understand, the video was filmed mid-August, so it
Okay.
would have been happening as the rail stuff was happening, but isn't technically a month ago, or maybe it's coming up.
Sure,
in a month.
okay.
Like, there is.
But clearly, Mel, the decision was made a long time ago.
I
Like
mean,
this was made early
again,
spring, early
I
summer?
think
when they
folks were
signed the
talking
deal,
about-
this was.
No, but I remembered my point earlier about well, they didn't say this is the thing that they want. I think they did do that in spring. Do I think that they talked about it enough so that folks knew exactly why they were walking away from it? No, but I think in the spring, that is what they kept saying. They kept saying, we need to do more. Here are some of the things that we need to do. And they kept hearing no. For the messaging of that, come September, I think they could have done a better job, to your point, of here is the reason why. But yeah, like I think it's.
I think it really changed how people. The attention on the NDP leader was not beneficial to him, and I hate to be
We'll see.
somebody
Yeah,
who's
we'll see. Yep.
makes predictions, but I was noticing some columnists in August start to talk about the NDP poll numbers and why is there conversation about Justin Trudeau sticking around and not about Singh, and I do wonder if. what he's showed us in the last, 48 hours has not been great. Does this start to, not that you have a lot of people waiting in the wings ready to jump in, but I'm wondering if, he doesn't seem to be that engaged in Ottawa and in his job, and I do wonder how long he's going to stick around.
Yeah, I was just going to say, New Democrats really love don't care. I don't think anybody's upset with Jagmeet Singh in the NDP party or in the NDP party. I can't believe I just said that. In the NDP right now. Oh my God! Sorry, folks. Please don't.
You're out.
Disown me after this one.
Well, look, it's interesting. I mean, Justin Trudeau is going to be running in his 4th national election. Jagmeet Singh is going to be running in his 3rd, right? So it'll be interesting to see if you can sort of make a new pitch to voters that way. But look, that election, we don't know who's going to run it for the Liberals, but we do know, Fred, it's not going to be Jeremy Broadhurst.
Right.
Who, there are other issues that you guys wanted to highlight this week. And Fred, this was yours as a former national campaign manager. Jeremy Broadhurst stepping aside. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. As a former national campaign manager and as someone who's worked on 4 national campaigns, the role of national campaign manager is a crucial, important role.
And you got to be all in.
You have to be all in. And Jeremy apparently wasn't, as he admitted himself. The fire doesn't seem to have been in his belly. But to be at the stage where we could be going into an election, theoretically, in 2 years now, maybe the NDP will actually continue to support the Liberals, and this is all for show. But we could go into an election and the Liberals without a campaign manager. I couldn't imagine to be at this stage. But at the end of the day, it is an opportunity at the same time for the Liberals to retool. Maybe, he's been the campaign manager for a year when he went back to the party, apparently, or a couple of years in and out. I know he ran the 19 campaign, but the last 2 Liberal campaigns have been quite lackluster. The Conservative, my party, has beaten them twice now in popular vote. Obviously not that what counts, but this could be there could be a silver lining here if they can get someone who has that fire in their belly and does it. But if we go, they have to get in now, and they need to have full confidence of the leadership to build that campaign team, build that narrative, and get ready to go.
Fred Delory,
but we could be going so
you
soon.
could be the first person to ever lead a national campaign for 2 different parties. It sounds to me like you are interested. Is this a little job application? I can put a good word in.
Well, Greg, what I've heard is that it's probably a couple of weeks before they figure out who the replacement is. I don't know if that's going to, I mean, get through the by-elections, because I think Jeremy will see that through and then figure out where you go. I don't know, but like this, people say they want change. We've seen Nate Erskine-Smith quoted as saying, like, this is significant change. I like Jeremy Broadhurst, but this is a chance to give it a jolt. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with Nate. I think, I appreciate the honesty in Jeremy's statement, as Fred alluded to. But, last year, going into the caucus retreat, Liberals MPs were saying that they wanted change. There were some changes around communication. We can discuss that at another time. But on this one, this may be the change that, like if we're talking about very basic things like red meat of change. Unfortunately, sometimes in order for people to feel that they've been heard, they need to see change. So perhaps ahead of the caucus, this will be the change that, there'll be enough of a change.
Right. So, Mel, people want change. People say they want change. You talked about getting outside of the bubble and going and seeing your normal people. My normal people, I know who Jeremy Broadhurst is. Right. I don't know if normal people would know that. Liberals know. Yep. If Justin Trudeau is still the Prime Minister and Katie Telford is still the Chief of Staff, and that's still where the shots are being called, does it matter?
I don't think so.
I don't know.
I don't think it does, and that's exactly what I was thinking as part of this conversation is your person who's with your guy, or in this case with the Prime Minister. If the advice is still the same, if the direction is still the same, if you still haven't figured out the why, that can't help the party. Right. When Jeremy went over to the party, it was. He's going to the party and he's going to shake things up a little bit. And
there was a lot of excitement in Liberal land.
A lot of excitement. Folks were so excited, and here we are a year later, and regardless of the deal, but regardless of the deal, you're in an election in the next year. Like that's.
We're in an election now.
Well, that's what I mean.
Let's be honest, right? It's just the Liberals have to keep Parliament going while they're campaigning as well.
And if you really want to change, do this after Toronto St. Paul's. We're now literally the week that the House is starting. People are expecting a message, and the time to develop that was over the summer. That can't happen with, this change happening today.
So, Greg, here we are. your crowd is going off to British Columbia, to Nanaimo, to have a caucus retreat. They've lost their coalition partner. Sorry, governing partner, not a coalition. That's a mistake. I'm not meaning it literally. I know, I'm sorry. Look, you said NDP party. I'm allowed to have my mistake.
Yeah, fair.
They've lost their national campaign director. Mark Carney is going to be coming to caucus to brief them on economic recovery and productivity. What's got to happen with the Liberals next week? This is the caucus meeting they've wanted for quite some time.
Well, yes, I can confirm Althea Raj, Toronto Star Scoop, that Mark Carney's attending caucus. You know, I missed it by about an hour for this show.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for the heads up, but go ahead.
Yeah, I know the Prime Minister has been talking to Mr. Carney, I think, a couple of times over the summer. You know, it's a big tent party. We just lost the orange section. Might have blown away a little bit. But I think there's a seriousness in the country that I'm not sure Liberals were telegraphing that they were listening to. And this is the thing I've talked about, where the preachiness and tone. I've even noticed the way that the Prime Minister speaks, the way he spoke to you when he came in here for the interview, less lofty, you know, less aspirational, more meat and potatoes. And I think there's a lot of people in Canada and in the Liberal Party that want to see this. Right. So if you've got people with the experience of Mark Carney that are offering you advice, or you can bounce things off on, absolutely take that advice.
Fred, I'm going to guess you think the Liberals need to come out of this with a message, with a narrative and a story to tell. Because I think you've mentioned that once or twice. Yeah.
It's interesting with Mark Carney going. He is he's always been rumored to be close. He's talked about running, or there's been people talking about him running, but never actually there. So to actually see him coming to that thing it's interesting. But what's going to come of it? To your point, a message, and what's going to change? He's not actually joining the government, from what I understand. He's not running. He's not doing anything. I know, as a Conservative in the last election, we were worried about him running for the Liberals last time. A lot of Canadians don't know who Mark Carney is, but when you tell them the former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor is thinking of running, the polling results were not good for Conservatives in terms of what the bump it gave Liberals. So what he actually does, what actually comes of this, I don't know. But again, with back to our previous story about Broadhurst leaving, going into this meeting, it's going to be a bit chaotic. Like, what is the plan coming out of this when you don't have someone actually in charge of your campaign in that meeting?
So no, they got to figure that out, and they've got a couple of by-elections coming up. One of which is a key win, must hold for your crowd, and a must hold for them. Right? What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, for sure. Just quickly on Carney, you know, I think for the Conservatives, I see the play there that could be interesting, because it brings some seriousness and some statesmanship, and maybe a little bit of steady to folks who are a little bit worried. But for our folks, it's how can this person understand what my working family is going through? This is not a connect that is going to make my life better tomorrow, or is going to make my life easier with the struggles that I'm going through. So for New Democrats, that's fascinating choice, and something that they are obviously going to pick up on. But for by-elections, there's two important by-elections coming in 2 weeks, and it's funny because it's, you know, the first day that the House comes back, and we're going to have these two by-elections that are going to be pretty important for a few parties involved. NDP in Winnipeg. No, it's going to be a close one. They, you know, if we look at a little bit of polls right now, they're up ahead, but they are going to be working really hard to keep that riding.
After pulling the plug, they got to win that, don't they? After saying this is a choice between me and Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh cannot lose Elmwood Transcona, don't you think?
I think, period. He really doesn't want to lose it, right?
No,
I
of
think
course.
That is a part
But his
of
career's
the
on the line
country.
here. If he loses these two seats, Jagmeet, I think he's failed as a leader, and the NDP really need to look internally on whether he stays.
I disagree with you, but I think that makes sense that we disagree on this one.
NDP seat.
I can tell you after St. Paul's, we all know what we talked about during the summer, right?
You think it's an NDP seat. It's not an NDP seat.
It's a Blakey seat,
It
is
is
what
a
they say.
Blakey seat. And when it's not a Blakey run, like in the orange wave, when we picked up seats in places it did not make sense that we picked up seats, we lost that one big time to the blue team. And in 2015, when Daniel ran, he won it by 63. When he ran again, I think he won it by 1,000. It's only in the last election that he was able to
it was
really
9,000 last time,
exactly,
I think,
which he was really able to pull it off. So this is not. the part of town is not like a safe NDP place. Like, this is something that actually takes a lot of work. So is it a huge one? Is it important for the NDP to hold it? Yeah. Do they think it's going to be tough to hold it? They do. So they're, putting all their resources in there, and they're also up against a Conservative Party that's pouring millions of dollars in that riding, and that, they're saying, oh, if we win it, we win it. But they are putting everything they've got in that riding, and they see that on the ground.
Millions, we can only spend like 80.
Yeah, no.
In between elections, I think in between elections, they were pouring ads in there against Jagmeet. So that's I think where the millions is coming
They've got money to burn. So.
Yeah, but for the La Salle, the Montreal seat, I think it's obviously a flip, right? It's the Liberals to lose. It's a huge riding for the Liberals. It used to be Paul Martin's old seat. Part of the riding used to be Paul Martin's old seat. This is, I think, not traditionally somewhere NDP does very well. Traditionally somewhere the Bloc doesn't do well either. And it looks like, the Bloc might be leading right now, the Liberals might be leading, the NDP's not too far behind. Obviously the NDP's putting a bunch of resources in that one because they'd love to win it, but they know it's a long shot.
Yeah.
They feel some hope on the ground, particularly with young people, so they're going to do everything they can to pull it off, but again, long shot.
Okay, we're out of time, but
Sorry.
20 seconds from you on the importance of La Salle-Mard in particular. Greg, for your crowd.
This by-election, like the one in St. Paul's, happened because of the cabinet shuffle last year, and there has been a really long delay in getting these by-elections called. That's
not a good sign.
That feels like a known goal.
Yeah. Fred, quick final thoughts?
Look, if the NDP can win these two ridings, maybe we've been wrong about them all night and they're doing great.
Well, Mel's been
Y'all
right.
have
She's
been
been dead
wrong.
right. Mel's been dead right.
But if it's a different result where the NDP lose to, or if the Liberals, it's going to be fascinating, these two by-elections. I think it's going to be really interesting, especially La Salle-Mard, where it's a three-party race by all account, with the Bloc Québécois also rising in the polls.
And the good thing is we'll all be back in the studio to cover it live online. All right, I want to thank our panel of party insiders for checking the pulse of Canadian politics. Greg McEachern, Melanie Richet, Fred Delory.